Welcome to the Vanguard podcast. Can you introduce yourself and tell listeners a little bit about your district and your campaign for Congress in West Virginia?
Sure, yes. My name is Hilary Turner, and I am the Democratic nominee for West Virginia's 3rd Congressional District.
Cool. So you already went to the primary and everything, and have won the primary.
Yes, so we finished our primary on June 11th.
Yeah.
Or, excuse me, June 9th, but then it took a few days of counting all the mail-in
Mhm.
ballots, and actually we didn't know for a whole week what the final
Oh,
canvas.
yeah. Actually, I think I saw that it was like super close, like less than a percentage point between you and your closest Democratic competitor.
Yes, so we actually won our primary by 67 votes out of, was it 55,000? It was a lot.
Phone banking matters.
Yes.
So something about your race that is really interesting to me is that previously in 2018, the Democrat who went up to challenge Carol Miller in the general was Richard Odetta, who kind of made a name for himself with his very brash run in 2018 and brief bid for the presidency. You seem like you probably have a slightly different strategy than Richard Ojeda to defeat Carol Miller. Can you tell us a little bit about that strategy and what your plan is exactly to oust her?
Sure. Yeah, Richard and I definitely have some differences. My campaign is actually a good bit more progressive with our platform stances. And we're hoping to really energize the youth and the progressive sector of the voters in West Virginia.
Um, what has it been like as a first time candidate and running in the midst of and trying to build relationships with people in the midst of a pandemic? Obviously a lot of the grassroots methods of reaching out to voters, knocking doors, holding conventional rallies, that sort of thing, aren't available. What have you been doing to kind of work with your campaign to make sure that people, know who you are and how you can build relationships with voters?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely been really difficult to move through the pandemic. Thankfully, we had a really strong start with grassroots organizing and movement before the pandemic. So thankfully, we were able to actually do, town hall events in 10 different counties within our district before the pandemic really took off. So we were actually also doing door knocking beforehand. So that was good to get a little bit of that experience, although, we really missed out on the big chunk of what that would have been, kind of out there in the field canvassing and town hall events. So I think everybody just kind of switched their lives to this more digital format, and people started spending a lot more time on social media and Facebook. So we kind of just adjusted our campaign to that. We tried to put out good video content just to let people know who I was. And we tried to reach out to voters, directly on social media and engage them and encourage them to engage their friends and family directly. So trying to still go with that grassroots approach to, hey, please help us spread this message. And so it barely worked.
You're obviously a bit younger than the incumbent Carol Miller. Do you think that plays to your advantage now that you're having to make most of your connections over social media, something that, she might not be as intuitive or, something that she's as familiar with?
I definitely think that's going to help us because, we understand how to use social media, and I'm sure there's somebody on her team that gets it, but I think everybody on our team, there's a lot of young people who are really passionate and excited about our campaign. So I think that's definitely going to help carry our message a bit further. And I kind of have more ground to make up on as far as name recognition, because she's somebody who, has, I guess her family's been big in the area for a long time. But I guess fortunately for our side, she's also, made kind of a bad reputation with a lot of voters. There's a lot of this feeling that, she doesn't return your phone call. She doesn't care about meeting with voters in person or really getting to know her constituency. So I think we definitely have some advantages, even though we are the underdog.
Is your district pretty like solidly blue or red? I'm kind of interested in what the reaction has been to some of your more progressive ideas and proposals. You say you're even to the left of Richard Odetta, who came up short a little over 10 points. I'm wondering, has there been a palpable need for progressive policy in your district, or have you had to convince people?
So West Virginia is really interesting politically. We are historically a Democratic state.
Yeah.
Over the past 10 years, it's been going more red as voters have become more and more disenfranchised with both parties, really. But Bernie Sanders actually did really well in West Virginia. And in 2016, there are actually more voters that came out and voted in the Democratic primary than in the general election for Democrats. So that just shows you he really energized West Virginia. And so going into this race, being a progressive and a Bernie supporter since 2016, and really 2015, but going into this race, I kind of was aware of that West Virginia actually does have a very strong progressive pocket. And so I figured, if we could really energize those people, connect with those people, that we could win in this district. And I think we do have a shot against Carol Miller, and I think that Democrats are really fired up and they're angry, across the board, moderates and progressives. So I'm really hoping that will turn out in our advantage.
Yeah, it seems like the region of Appalachia as a whole is sort of, epitomizes the hollowing out of America that we've seen in these small pockets throughout our country. And I'm just kind of wondering if you could give us, the people, an idea of some of the struggles that people in your district are facing, and how a lot of times it sort of mirrors the struggles of our urban populations, but they, don't get as much of attention because they're in the middle of, the country.
Yeah, for sure. And we do have some urban populations within West Virginia and within our district, although we do have a lot of rural population as well. So in the history of West Virginia, one reason why we are historically a blue state is because the labor movement started here with the coal miners, and they actually fought against the coal companies, and the coal companies brought in the National Guard. So there was actually a battle, and so workers' rights were really earned in the mountains of West Virginia. That history is still really important here as far as, workers' solidarity and the workers' movement. I think that's why Bernie did really well here with a working class message. West Virginia also has, we're the poorest state in the country. So 20% of people in West Virginia live in abject poverty, which is twice below the poverty line. So, you drive through some of these communities that have really been left behind in the past 10 years. And you can start to feel like, there has been a huge amount of neglect as far as roads. A lot of people don't have plumbing. A lot of people don't have access to internet or cell service. So you get this feeling of a third world country. A lot of people don't have access to healthcare facilities near them. So if they have a medical emergency, it becomes a lot more risky for them. So a candidate who is coming forward and talking about, universal healthcare, getting people more access to healthcare, and addressing the needs of the working class people, I think that actually does really excite a lot of people here.
Yeah, and to kind of illustrate your point about West Virginia being energized by the progressive movement, and especially that of Bernie Sanders, it's really cool that, along with yourself, several other progressive women have also won their primaries in West Virginia. They're now going on to compete in the general, including Paula Jean Swearingen, who's, of course, one of the original Justice Democrats from 2016. West Virginia was also where some pretty incredible teacher strikes organized a couple of years ago. And yeah, can you just speak more about the progressive groundswell kind of happening there and that energy that you've been kind of hopefully riding to victory?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been really blessed and grateful to be a part of a bigger movement here within West Virginia. I'm going to give a lot of credit to the West Virginia Can't Wait movement, started by Stephen Smith, who ran for governor and unfortunately didn't make it past the primary this time, but he really helped kickstart a huge movement of over 90 candidates throughout the state who pledged to not take corporate money. So addressing, corporate, I guess, political corruption and corporate money within politics it's huge here. And you talk to a lot of voters, and political corruption is their number one issue. So yeah, being a part of that movement really helped me as far as, we did trainings with Stephen Smith. We were connected to a larger grassroots network of organizers in every single county that really allowed us to spread our message further and let people know, what we were really about, and build kind of a broader base of trust for, people who aren't just coming forward and telling the public more lies or more of like what they want to hear, but there's, real bold commitments.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and actually every congressional district in West Virginia, we have 3. A woman has won, and they were all part of the West Virginia Can't Wait movement, including Paula Jean Swearingen running for Senate. So we have 4. All 4 of our federal candidates are women who have signed this pledge to not take corporate money. So that's huge for West Virginia history.
That's tremendous. Just to kind of stay on the topic of teachers a little bit longer, one of the parts of your campaign that Gavin and I found pretty exciting was the way that you've talked pretty openly about the need to reform how we, treat public education in this country, and specifically how we treat our teachers. Being a teacher is a, thankless profession. It's long hours. It's low pay. You've proposed a minimum wage for teachers of $60,000 a year. I just wondered if you could talk about the failings of our current public education system and how we can restore it to this source of pride, which it once was in our nation's history, except this time we'll make it accessible to everyone, not just white children.
Yeah, absolutely. Teachers, it's one of the most important jobs in this country, and they have such a huge responsibility to educate our children, which are our future. I've worked as a teacher. I've worked, as a substitute teacher. I've worked in public schools. I've taught in private schools. I've taught English abroad. So I have like this wide range of experiences. And, looking at how in Europe, they pay their teachers well and treat them like professionals, and you can see the results as far as the educational outcomes. Their students are doing a lot better, and they also give them a lot more freedom in the classroom. And that's something we talk a lot about in America. It's, a big word we throw around is freedom, but how much freedom do we give our students and our teachers in the classroom when we mandate that, they have this extremely strict, syllabus, they're teaching for these tests, and there's no freedom for creativity, and we're not giving our children, time to go outside. A lot of schools have gone to maybe 15 minutes a day for young children, and I feel like that's really unhealthy. I think kids should get an hour of outside time. Teachers should have a lot of creativity. The creativity of each student should be nurtured. And of course, we should pay our teachers well so we can attract talent and really reward them for the hard work that they're doing.
That's such a great point, especially about the schools, becoming increasingly kind of like, restrictive of freedom. I remember towards the end of like my high school experience, it was just getting so increasingly kind of totalitarian with like the security cameras, and if you propped a door open for too long, an alarm would go off in the whole school. Like all these crazy measures to make
It's
sure
kind of scary. Like
no one
they're
left
kind of,
the
it's
premises.
like
Yeah,
a prison
it
mentality.
really is like a crazy prison mentality. And given how important and necessary schooling is, it's you think we'd have more thinking going on about how we should reform that system, how we should, make it a better public utility for people.
Yeah, just a quick question that I had. As somebody who's had experience in both public and private schools, could you just talk about a bit of the disparity? What's it like in a public school versus a private school? Gavin and I were both publicly educated, K through 12. So I was just curious, what's the difference in, education style, quality? What would you make note
Sure.
of?
So I actually had experience as a Montessori teacher in a preschool. So it was more it was more geared towards early education, but it was Montessori style. So the goal of the philosophy of Montessori is to give each student as much freedom to I guess, explore their creativity and their interests as possible. And I definitely think that's something we could incorporate into public schooling, as far as just giving children more freedom, rather than saying you're all gonna learn this, this, and this, like when we say to, and there's no encouragement for you to like pick out your own books, your own research topic. Well, sometimes, you can pick your research topic, but sometimes it's given to you. And so even from an early education standpoint, I think early and earlier we're putting these kids through stressful testing. And I don't think that's conducive to early childhood development. So, yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I haven't had an experience in like a broad range of private schools, but I definitely think that sometimes there is a disparity, and we should be giving all children, equal and equitable access to education, early education, and higher education.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to pivot too far, but one of the things that Gavin and I have, spoken about frequently as of late off air, is how the left needs to reintegrate agrarian politics into the greater left political messaging. And there's this sort of sentiment that among rural pockets, there's a waning interest in things like the Green New Deal or Medicare for all. But if you, sort of ask people, typically they do care about the destruction of the planet and getting good healthcare coverage. Could you talk about the reception that you've gotten from voters about things like the Green New Deal, and talk about a bit about your proposals to help small farmers?
Yeah, so there's a lot there, but I want to talk about an Appalachian Green New Deal, because a Green New Deal is definitely something that is exciting as far as its potential for West Virginia, because we definitely have really low employment, and we have people leaving West Virginia every day because of just lack of economic opportunities here. So a Green New Deal could definitely create jobs here, as far as infrastructure, developing our parks, developing tourism. And I'd also like to see more grants for small business development. But I also would like to see grants for young people who want to get into farming, for them to be able to get land, get training, get the equipment and resources that they need to get started if they want to get into farming. And I think we've had this huge shift towards corporate, large monoculture businesses and large agricultural businesses, and we are subsidizing those large corporate agricultural businesses instead of helping small family farmers. So I would like to see a shift back to helping small family farmers get started and sustain themselves. Here in West Virginia, my family has a farm in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, that's been in our family for 6 generations. It was a dairy farm, and we also had here in West Virginia a lot of apple orchards, but both dairy farms and apple orchards kind of became, I guess, unsustainable economically for a lot of families. So a lot of them are not really active anymore, including my family's farm. But we would like to start growing hemp, but then there's legal barriers to that as well. So one of my platform points is to legalize hemp and cannabis as well, because I think that could be a great boost for small farmers here in West Virginia. Those are plants that grow really well in Appalachia. But getting back into, sorry, we're kind of going all over the place a little bit, but getting back to the Appalachian Green New Deal, you know, I think that we need to
Hello? Seems like you're frozen up a bit. I don't know if you...
Sure, yeah. So I think we definitely need to support small family farmers. We've gone in a direction where the government is actually subsidizing large agricultural corporations and push the economy more and more towards that, and large monoculture operations that are also really harmful for the environment and don't, you know, help families economically on, you know, a broader range as far as, you know, access to land and resources. And so I would like to see more of a shift back towards supporting small family farms. And I think from the government, we can switch our subsidizing to supporting, you know, small organic family farms. And even I would like to see grants going towards young people who want to start farms or get training or resources and, you know, sustain those farms, or even if they have a family farm, they have land, getting funding to transition that farm into maybe a sustainable, if they want to switch to something more sustainable, you know, having some training and resources going towards that as well. So I think I was also talking about how my family has a farm in Greenbrier County that goes back 6 generations. It was a dairy farm, but it's currently inactive. There were a lot of dairy farms in West Virginia, as well as apple operations that were, I guess, got to a point where they weren't economically sustainable anymore, or they weren't really making it. So a lot of people might have land in their family, but they're not able to do a lot with it. So I think, you know, putting energy and resources back into that and really encouraging young people to get into that and supporting them economically in that transition, I think is important. I also would like to see hemp and cannabis be legalized because that could be a great economic boom for West Virginia. Those plants grow really well here in Appalachia, and there's already a lot of farmers I know in Greenbrier County that are switching to growing hemp, but there are also legal hurdles to that, where you have to apply for a permit, and then your THC levels have to be under a certain amount, and it's a very low threshold, and if they're just slightly above, they'll confiscate your entire crop, and you can invest thousands and thousands of dollars, you know, into planting hemp, industrial hemp, and then the government can come and just kind of just destroy your crop and your investment.
Meanwhile, there are...
So I would like to see...
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, meanwhile, there are pharmaceutical companies that are legally and oftentimes with the encouragement of our elected officials, pumping our communities and your community, as you've mentioned, full of poisonous, you know, essentially opiates that have sedated an entire generation's workforce after, you know, the jobs were abandoned. And yet it's the, you know, 4 or 5 percentage points of THC that they've decided to invest their energy in, you know, weeding out.
Right. It's definitely really hypocritical, and it just shows us how much control the pharmaceutical industry has over our government and our country. And there's probably a reason why they're really pushing against um, cannabis being fully legalized, because guess what? People use it medicinally to handle their pain, to handle epilepsy, and they want people to continue to be dependent on their often harmful prescription drugs that are expensive, they overcharge for, and then they also have this stranglehold on our entire medical system and are fighting against universal health care and people actually having access to doctors and medicine. So one thing that I'm going to be really passionate about is just standing up against those pharmaceutical companies and all that corporate money coming in, trying to write our laws, all their lobbyists. And I will say that Carol Miller, my opponent, has investments in major pharmaceutical companies that came in and pushed a lot of opioids into our communities, intentionally getting people addicted for profit.
Yeah, criminal. Yeah, and who are we filling our prisons with? One of the other questions we wanted to talk to you about was, as we've seen across the country, people are taking to the streets to demand criminal justice reform, to demand change in a police system that you're a candidate in the South. Policing was molded by slave catching. It has a very tumultuous history at best. I just wondered if you could talk about the change that people are demanding and how we can reform policing and the justice system at large to be one that takes care of everybody equally.
Absolutely. Yeah, West Virginia definitely has racism within its criminal justice system and police force, even the state police. I know people personally who have been severely affected by this. I know people personally who have lost family members to police brutality. And I definitely think we need really strong reforms in our police systems across the country. We need to make sure that police forces aren't hiring racist people. That's like, it should be a given. And we need to address what's happening in our courts and our judges. If we have judges that are giving harsher sentencing to people of color, I feel like those judges should be removed. And so we definitely need more oversight throughout our entire system to be looking for these things and to not continue to let them slide.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally crazy that even has to be said, that there should be oversight over, cops and judges that are racist or, maybe wrongly imprisoning American citizens. Insanity. But thank you for taking a stand unlike your opponent. One last question I had for you, not to end on too much of a downer, but today has been kind of a sad day in the progressive community because Charles Booker, unfortunately, it seems, came up short in his primary bid against Amy McGrath in Kentucky. We thought he could have gone on to defeat Mitch McConnell. Do you have any message for people that just feel like totally disaffected by the electoral system? Progressives that want and need progressive change in their lives, but just aren't seeing that, voting as a viable way to make that happen. People that think that the system is so hopelessly rigged against them and their priorities, and so in favor of the corporate interests that it's just, it's not worth their time or energy.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and there's so much to it. I was really disappointed by Booker's loss in Kentucky. I was really rooting for him, and Amy McGrath raised like $40 million in a primary race, which I think is really insane. And I definitely think that we need huge election reform as soon as possible, and really looking at, do we really need or want so much money in our political system to be able to influence things like that. Because I think that Booker was such an excellent candidate with a real message, and people were so hungry for that and really wanted to support that. And it's, no matter how great your message is, it's really hard to go up against, $40 million or, whatever huge amount of money it is. But what I would say is that the good news is that he did extremely well and he almost won. And if you can look at that into the future, maybe next time him or someone like him would actually be able to get that extra push, because I think that with each election we're seeing like more young people are able to vote, and people are becoming more and more conscious, and the youth are becoming more and more energized. As far as progressives winning this year, I think it's just been a hard year in general. I mean, if you look at the presidential race, is really disappointing, obviously, and there were so many great progressives running across the whole country, and a lot of them unfortunately didn't make it past the primary phase, although there are a list of a few dozen progressives that did win their primaries. So I think something to celebrate that, even though so have some victories moving forward, growing, and it seems slow, but I'm hoping that, in 2 years, we're going to see even more progressives win. And then beyond that, we're going to, it's just going to keep building until that is the new norm. Because I think something to keep in mind is that our movement, in a way, I mean, it's been around, but as far as like mainstream political power, like real political power, it's actually pretty new in the grand scheme of our country's political history. So I think if we can just continue pushing forward and building it, we will definitely be able to get somewhere to where, we can really fundamentally change how things happen in this country.
Well, Hilary, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. If people want to support your campaign, where should they go?
So you can go to my website, turnerforcongresswv.com. And I really appreciate y'all giving me the time. If you want, you can, follow us on Twitter, we're on Facebook. So we really update a lot of things. That's my little one calling, so I'm going to have to hop off the phone in just a sec. But
no problem. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.